As moths are drawn to flame, there is some core deep within humanity that is drawn to darkness, to seek out the mirror that is buried deep under the substance of the lighted world and turn it over such that it reflects the shadows hidden on the other side. It's the understanding that there is a dissonance that thrums quietly in the background and blackly underpins every moment of existence, that there is always a lurking moon waiting to eclipse the sun. Is the opening screen of Obsidian a warning then? The commanding blood moon perhaps an omen for a journey about that gravitational pull of darkness? What calamitous truth awaits to eclipse our naive understanding of things? It's within our nature to want to find out. Obsidian is a 32-map megawad released in 2023 by Snaxolotl, and it's notable for its adherence to vanilla compatibility and stock texture usage, minus custom skies, and its atmospheric and chilling soundtrack, which the author herself also composed. The elevator pitch of this wad is that it's almost a dark reimagining of the Doom 2 story, but it's a pitch that sells Obsidian short. What begins as a bleak and twisted exploration of the classic Doom 2 journey, piggybacking off the ethos of the author's previous wad Stickney installation, quickly unfolds into something more layered and interesting than just Doom 2, but the Dark World version. Indeed, Obsidian slowly lures you in with apprehension and disquietude before taking you deep into the kind of pitch-black places you dare not let your spirit tread. Dread and discordance. There's a loose narrative here that breaks the wad up into 3 distinct episodes, and you can trace a through line where Obsidian begins closer to a twisted version of Doom 2 before sprawling out into its own exploration of industrial decay and flesh-choked darkness. Episode 1 begins us in a familiar enough tech base where you'll immediately be drawn to the deep blue sky and even more so, the atmospheric music. The wad opens with the tension of a John Carpenter film, quiet moments accompanied by soft, meandering synthesizer chords that set the mold for what you'll hear throughout. In the same spirit, action comes at a gradual build, rarely explosive from the drop. Map 1, Arrival, pits you against fewer than 30 monsters and gives you a shotgun with enough shells to prioritize some targets before, in all likelihood, falling back on the chainsaw and pistol to finish the map. Overall, the combat is nothing too crazy yet. Secrets are here to provide you with 1 or 2 more quick kills, but unless you're used to seeing switches hidden like this, don't expect to get your hands on any extra hardware. I think this opener really captures what Obsidian is going for. The title implies you've come here with a purpose, as if this place was some intended destination, and it's that quiet apprehension that really whets your appetite for the dimly lit and narrow tech green corridors and lights you can practically hear softly humming overhead. Map 2, Water Purifier, is the earliest evidence that Obsidian hasn't quite yet figured out that it doesn't want to be just a Doom 2 reimagining, and places most of its bet on the map that it's inspired by. But let's be honest, there's no way to invoke the original underhalls and come out on top in the comparison. As much as I love flooded tunnels and pipe walls, this map often matches the original almost beat for beat, and rearrangements of layouts and room orientations aren't enough to mask the identical progression. As a short Doom 2 map, it's perfectly serviceable, but for better and for worse, that's probably the most notable thing about it that doesn't have to do with underhalls. Then again, Underhall's homage is practically its own subgenre of maps at this point, so I suppose it's not really that big of a deal. Map 3, Hydroelectric Grid, is one of my early favorites. Still owing the core of its visual language to its Doom 2 counterpart, it does elevate beyond with a somber ambience and clear industrial purpose of its setting. And maybe in this case, the comparison to the original works to its benefit, since Gauntlet is kind of an annoying map backed by one of my least favorite Doom 2 middies, and so really any number of changes could stand out as an improvement. Set on and around some sort of power generator, you'll fall into a familiar rhythm of hit-scan heavy combat, but occurring within space that's interesting to move around and open up for some free-flow gameplay. This blue sky combined with these overhead lights and metallic structures really does a lot to place you in a cold and inescapably apathetic world, owing perhaps the first tinge of futility to your efforts. Whether or not that proves to be true, we'll have to see. Map 4, Service Tunnels, is another quick map with some punctuated bursts of peekaboo shotgun corner popping and precarious footing. Here we really see where Snaxolotl will feel comfortable employing a direct reference to the source map, but with a notable change to the map's benefit. You may see these tech light shutters and recall how they bounced open and closed with hit scanners in the focus, and so you'll wonder when or if they'll open with a similar trap. And regardless of if you're correct, there's an emotional payoff predicated on your anticipation. Relief and panic become core gameplay variables. This isn't the last time the map does this either, and we'll see some good classic misdirection employed by the end. Playing with the balance of the player's anticipation and expectation makes up a core pillar of the WoD's identity. Aside from these obvious homages and motifs owed to the originals, whole gameplay conceits are often invoked and turned on their heads, playing frequently on your expectations. There's some emotional depth that takes shape as the WoD continues, and it intrinsically relies on your nostalgia, or at least recollection of the Doom 2 originals. It's good here, but unfortunate then when it doesn't pan out. Map 5, Sludge Conduit, is a dead ringer for the waste tunnels, and it might be an early low point for Episode 1. It feels more like a "the way we remembered it" version of the map than anything else, and the most notable thing about it is that it's tiny. Cramped is something Obsidian does pretty well at least, and we get some good usage of mid-tiers here in these slim passages. There's really not a lot else to say about it though. It's pretty quick, but it's otherwise a beat-for-beat remake of the original. Perhaps sticking with the source material forced Snaxolotl to work through bouts of disinterest if the original wasn't one she was fond of, which seems inevitable with the inconsistent nature of Doom 2. It's surely a risk that comes with a premise like this. But if the overt similarity to the original source material feels uninspired now, don't worry, because Obsidian is about to really find its footing. Map 6, Slag Dump, is perhaps the first map that truly begins to feel wholly inspired, and also takes a turn for the sinister. Even the name gives off a crude purpose, the byproduct of relentless industry, placing you deep into a churning steel machine that bears a slight animus to your intrusion. The MIDI fills in a lot of empty space, simple percussion that drops in and out, and the long, droning notes of the organ almost churn like reciprocating arms and pistons and bellowing engines. Crushers lift and drop uncaringly, appendages of the machine, and it becomes apparent how harrowing it is to get into a skirmish here. The Spider Mastermind is present for the first time, which would almost be too obvious not to include here, but at least she serves a purpose controlling the opening parts of the map. As the action uncoils quickly, mid-tiers jam up your precious space while you scramble for some crevice to duck into and hope you don't get pinned with your back to the Mastermind. At some point, the music shifts, sounding now like a chanting procession. The machine in its endless churn, while the map around you transforms, shedding its very walls and laying the boiling pits below to bare. This turns parts of the map into a tightrope walk, and you realize this is feeling like the first map in the WoD where you survive it rather than beat it. Very little quarter is given, and any homage to the Crusher is distorted into the deadliest version of itself, driving a sustained tension that finally ends with some calm and emotional relief. As you emerge and see the sky, you can't help but look back for a moment and feel that your escape came by the skin of your teeth. Slag Dump still owes a lot to the original, but there's something to be said for the clear reverence this map has for it as well. You have to give the Crusher some real credit for providing some strong atmospheric basis that Snaxalot take some true inspiration from. I've always felt like the Crusher was an underbaked map concept even for Doom 2, and it's nice to see it being given almost a second chance here. Map 7, Corroded Ruins, is a quick boss map that seems less interested in cleverly iterating on the original so much as offering a bite-sized and hectic fight to tie up Obsidian's first stretch. This isn't the end of the first episode, but it is the first real capstone of the WoD. There's something cathartic about emerging from the subterranean and claustrophobic locales of the past few maps, and the way it culminates in this frantic skirmish provides some emotional release. When the dust settles and you take stock in the waste around you under this deteriorated overpass, you can't help but steel yourself and accept that this is only just getting started. Corroded Ruins bears very little resemblance to Dead Simple aside from the monster composition, and it's all the better for it. It's a good transitional map in a spot where one is about due, and it's the kind of map that helps you keep sight of the fact that some maps are truly there for the greater WoD and much less so for their own sake. The ratcheting drums that open Map 8, Demon Core's MIDI, rouse you from any notion that this will be a slow-rolling reset after the boss map. It eschews the more gimmicky nature of tricks and traps and packs in several tight and intense encounters instead. The pumping music is practically frenetic by Obsidian standards and pairs well with the action, which is consistently close-quartered and panic-inducing, and over before you can blink. You'll notice some echoes of the original Map 8 and Demon Core's visual design and gameplay arrangements, but ultimately it doesn't play like a roulette of wacky ideas and omits things like the Baron and Cyberdemon infight room. Instead, we'll truly see the first vestiges of the hellish influence over the very material of the world, as the titular core is revealed to be a malformation of skin and pulsating stone with a powerful sentry stalking deep inside. Obsidian doesn't do much with overt environmental storytelling. You almost never see disaster-strewn offices with doom-cute computers and loose papers or complicated scripted sequences, but there are thin strands of narrative tucked in here. More like the stitching in the upholstery in that, when it's done right, it really tightens the whole thing up while you barely notice it. If things haven't felt past the point of no return by now, then it's Map 9, Hadal Facility, where this sentiment cements into place. An element that's been mostly absent from Obsidian until now has been that sense of meandering non-linearity you get from a good mid-length adventure map, and it's here that the WoD breaks up that formula. Offering you 2 objectives across 4 potential paths, you have the chance to commit yourself to some blind choices that each come with their own rewards and dangers. This sense of the unknown meshes well with the sprawl of the facility and the restless energy on which you'll shoot your way through. The music pulses in a marching, almost triumphant cadence, accompanied by these tumbling, knocking melodies that feel like the creaks you'd hear in a deep underwater structure. It gives the map a real sense of momentum and inevitability, like this whole journey is building to something. Meanwhile, all around you the hostility ramps up and the pressure builds. The combat has a way of drawing you deeper into the map, and Hadal Facility might be one of the first in Obsidian where you feel an initial scarcity in firepower, an imbalance that heavily favors the demons. A prevalence of shotgunners forces you to wade through lower tiers like imps and lost souls to prioritize them and entrench yourself in danger, while mid-tiers ambush and threaten you along narrow ledges, requiring some risky moves to avoid fire. Equipping yourself requires delving further and further into the hostile facility. Once you ascend to the surface, it culminates in an exhilarating bloodbath that begins and ends in a flash. This is nasty, visceral work. One thing Obsidian does well is this abstractification of more realistic-looking spaces. A thought that slowly emerges during this WoD's narrative is that reality is not well. The placement of odd monoliths in an otherwise innocuous cafeteria, itself adjacent to a winding slime pit chamber, drive home the unease that this isn't just a rebellion against hell. It's a trek through a world that is spiraling into an unrecognizable state. Map 10 begins with a hard charge into the industrial crypt. The opening scrum forces your hand almost immediately and will leave you bloody in a scramble to obtain some resources and avoid as much chip damage as possible. After that, you've got a choice. With a monster count well above 200, this is the densest map so far and will be until the very end of the WOD. No matter what, the path forward won't be easy. The chilling unease of this complex comes not from its demon infestation, but the brutalism of its design that you understand in your heart is made by the hand of man. That's not to say there is some antagonistic nature of man's own folly at play here, yet what is this ash-covered and nukage-slicked existence you're fighting so hard to save? For as much as the deep blue sky up until now has bathed the maps in a bruised, somber beauty, it's also bathed them in a kind of grime, a harsh grit that's accumulated on every surface. This map hits the sweet spot between paying homage to Refueling Base at multiple opportunities and imbuing it with Obsidian's quintessential dreadful gloominess. Refueling Base's iconic hit scanner room is overhauled as a mad dash to carve through a disorderly horde of former humans in the dark with a surprise cyber demon hot on your tail, popping out of the alcoves at the worst moments and splashing viscera across the walls in his own rampage. There's a part in the MIDI loop where this single chord sustains for what feels like an eternity, matching the feeling of tension that likely has you holding your breath, that release delayed until you can bear it no longer. It's an absolutely fever-pitched and nerve-wracking encounter that will burn itself into your memory long after your playthrough is over. By now, this struggle to survive is a persistent experience and at times feels like you're not staving off death but extinction itself. The music evokes this feeling of determinism and also fatalism. Should you really endeavor to break open the seal of this industrial crypt? But also, do you really have a choice? Obsidian robs you of the ability to shake loose the feeling that things are bigger than you and beyond your comprehension, perhaps even beyond your influence. As you finally descend into Map 11, Sarcophagus, it's here you may finally get some answers. Map 11 is the true end of Episode 1, and also of the hope that things will ever be the same again. The furious battle that kicks off immediately is almost a brief delay in the arrival of a foregone outcome. While you slay several score of demons with your super shotgun and rocket launcher, your focus is purely on survival. An angry cyber demon and a deadly drop ensure you have no choice but to fight with all ferocity. It's only after the final corpse falls that you can now realize where you've been led. Materially, this is surely some kind of nuclear reactor. The word sarcophagus is notable as referring to the structure built around Chernobyl nuclear power plant after it infamously melted down in 1986. But there is another meaning, and one more body to lay down, because Obsidian's sarcophagus isn't for a decaying reactor, it's for you. Haven't you seen it this whole time? That flickering darkness that calls to your inner humanity? Is the mirror pointed at the world, or is it pointed at you? You came here with a hope of finding survivors and true refuge, as the following story text would imply, but could that hope ever be fulfilled by a world such as Obsidian's? The fantastical allure of darkness, the permanent disquietude from knowing the other shoe will drop, and it's just a matter of when. Whether or not you've deluded yourself into thinking you might avoid it this time, deep down, you've always known you can't. But then there comes a second chance at something. This world is no longer what it was, and an eternity has passed to make it this way. In Map 12, you wake up on the outer plane, a tangent skimming away from the world we knew before. Vaguely familiar shapes and textures construct a pure abstraction of reality, a facsimile that fails to understand the true purpose of anything and calls forth an almost existential nightmare. While this map bears the vaguest resemblance to some of the Factory's noteworthy elements, we have basically abandoned the pretense of reimagining an original Doom 2 map. We're in a different world now. Gameplay-wise, this is the calming reset we've been waiting for. An eternity of death brought about a kind of peace, and that experience ebbs us back to life like a receding shoreline, rather than splashing into the deep end in a cold shock. We are in the process of waking back up, and the map, while not a sleepwalk, eases us back into the action. Apparently there is still work to be done, but for now its greater purpose will remain a mystery. What's clear is that, while this renewed carnage is very real, this place represents the fusion of the material and the immaterial, and it's now the kind of world that allows us to enter the decayed mind of a vast demon of bygone glory, so that we may behold the prophetic vision of Map 13. This might be the most distressing and heart-wrenching map in the whole WoD. Could this be a memory of humanity's last dying struggle against an unconquerable force? Set within a small cityscape under a hellish invasion, everything in this map works to overwhelm you. This is the kind of moment Obsidian spends a lot of time building toward. Snaxolotl's ethos for Obsidian appears to fixate quite a bit on pacing and understanding the value of downbeat moments. They empower the more intense set pieces to be truly extraordinary. I can almost never say this about an Icon of Sin map, but this one is incredible. The backing MIDI sounds like a war zone with helicopters and gunshots mixed into a wholly alien droning that drowns the senses in thick sludge. Meanwhile, you're besieged on another front by the spawn cube sound in lockstep with a ticking clock. The forces of hell ceaselessly flooding into the city to clog every strip of free space. It's an effective move to pair the Icon of Sin mechanics with an actual invasion narrative and, forgive me for being up my own ass with this one, some genuine ludonarrative confluence. Survival is the only objective here. This place is beyond saving. Knowing from the drop that you can never slay every monster, the gameplay becomes a mad scramble for any sense of direction or objective to complete. Several gotcha moments move to frustrate you further, with previous paths locking behind you and forcing you forward into danger, ratcheting up that panic in compounding steps. Relief pops like a busted spring when you finally escape. What devastation do you now leave behind, and what sorrow do you carry forth with you? It's unclear how we arrive at Map 14 Oasis, the chain of causality having been broken with this new reality, but it comes as a welcome moment of quiet and reprieve and perhaps some needed introspection. It's hard to describe the MIDI for this one, but there's a soothing, pensive quality to it that has you more in your own head than in the physical space of the map. Traipsing through floodwaters and buildings of brown stone, the gameplay is almost combat by numbers, and the result is a tranquilizing effect that has you in an almost meditative state. There are a few moments of elevation peppered within. No rest in Obsidian comes smuggled in completely pure after all, but nothing about this map endeavors to really challenge you either. With the Inmost Dens being a consistent favorite among fans, like the Underhalls, there's almost no way to come out on top by making yourself a comparison. Oasis doesn't shy away from that, but it also doesn't seem to be about the comparison either. At this point in the WoD, we'll continue to see maps that more often veer away from their base inspiration, so it's nice to see one that stands almost as a monument to the original, while finding a way to give it a purpose that fits in with Obsidian's greater ambitions. Map 15, Collapse, is set amongst the ruins of a buried city block. An eruption of violence comes in short order, a small urban maze plinked with low tiers and a cyber demon to give chase the moment you take your first shot. I've gone back and forth on this one, and it feels hard to talk about without calling attention to that. Obsidian has a good handle on the value of making a situation feel worse than it actually is. It's a mechanism for toying with your emotions, but that doesn't always work, and Collapse's bark is worse than his bite. In this one, you'll be quick to realize that, although you won't have the hardware to directly confront him until the very end, the cyber demon isn't interested in chasing you deep into the ruins and doesn't amount to much of a threat. Similarly, the ensuing combat kind of unfolds across a sustained lull, in sharp contrast to its intimidating opening, but not in a way that carries over from that odd serenity of the previous map. Collapse affords you many quiet moments, traversing shadowy alleys between buried towers of brick and rubble, but it fails to evoke that trepidation you feel at other points in the WoD. Even the cyber demon's clopping hooves nearby afford a more comforting rhythm than imposing timer. And yet, something about its form begets an intrigue, the presence of layers to be peeled back. Hell's corruption is observable once again, these marble and wood structures out of place amongst the brick and glass of the human world. Perhaps this city does have something far more daunting buried below the surface. Should you indulge that curiosity, you'll be spirited away to Map 31, Reanimator, a dark experiment that's fitting of Obsidian's general nature, but which doesn't do much else for me. The premise involves using archviles to resurrect crushed monsters and invoke the Ghosts bug, which makes monsters indestructible unless they take splash damage. It's an interesting concept, but mostly a gimmick. In application, the map is a giant circular arena that you're rushing to figure out how to escape from while a maelstrom swirls around you. As the manifestation of some distilled malevolence, it serves its purpose in reinforcing the overall tone of the WoD, but that's about all it does. On the other hand, this form of experimentation, realized to a terrifying extent, is Map 32, Bed of Creation. Have we finally reached the true core of everything? Here, the tapestry of reality has unwoven down to its very strands. As if you occupy the empty space between them, the Bed of Creation represents the abandonment of true physical form, bringing you to a place that is pure abstract. Using the intercept overflow bug of the vanilla Doom engine, you take on an incorporeal form and are able to pass through all of the map's interior walls. In this formless void, your goal is to find your bearings and escape, but you'll soon realize you are not alone. Archviles stalk through what is essentially a maze, demanding that you phase between walls to avoid their blasts, but these new rules of engagement bring an extra tension, as you're also completely powerless to fight back in any way. The MIDI buries you underneath layers of deep noise, unrelenting in its totality. There is only one thing this place makes abundantly clear: you are not meant to be here. You never were. This is a pure indifferent hostility, something eldritch that peers through the seams of Obsidian's world, the brief glimpse at the shadow moving on the other side of the keyhole. Once you're gone, you've left without a trace, but this place has left something with you. Map 16, Cold Ascent, is a return to the action Obsidian is known for. With stir-the-pot combat that's chaotic in nature, this map's rooftop setting is actually a large, segmented arena with lots of potential for free-form gameplay. A narrow path around the perimeter offers an easy place to get blocked by mid-tiers, so while you're grabbing all the supplies you can and getting kills of opportunity, you must also be careful not to get trapped with a Mancubus or a Cacodemon in your way. Being considerate with your usage of valuable resources is an expectation consistently put upon you. The super shotgun isn't exactly rare, but the WAD isn't always forthright with it either, meaning there's a lot of reliance on the chain gun and pump shotgun, while the rocket launcher and plasma gun are supplements you bring to bear when you really need. With Cold Ascent, you have quick access to plenty of resources, giving you the edge for a change. Cold Ascent is probably a good example of where the Vizplane limit with vanilla compatibility works to the map's benefit. Visually, I've always appreciated these strange columns that break up your sightlines to abide the Vizplane limit, but they also serve to offer both cover and ambush spots during combat. When the map floods with demons in its finale, the bit of extra pressure they add makes the whole thing as harrowing as it should be, and leaves you as one of the more memorable set pieces in the whole WAD. Aside from some texturing choices, we are far from the conceit of reimagining Doom 2 maps at this point. Cold Ascent bears only the illusion of a city, with suggestions floating in the periphery that things continue to shift beyond recognition. The Suburbs is a memorable map in its own right, but you barely give it a passing thought, if any at all, while playing this one. Snaxolotl loves setups where you're chased by a cyberdemon and under-equipped to fight back, and if you hadn't picked up on that by now, then Map 17, Predation, will really drive the point home. This is a crowning example of that frantic pursuit concept, a map cleverly constructed to allow the cyberdemon to appear at any moment, and one where you'll have to deal with him until the very end. The best chase is one fraught with risks, offering you quick ways to escape danger at some expense, and this map is sprinkled with them. Along most paths, you have the option to stick to the safety of walkways that wind through arenas littered with monsters, or cut across damaging floors in a pinch. And sometimes, you might not even have a choice as you dive off the safe path when the cyberdemon suddenly appears to fling a rocket at you. This is another map that feels legitimately sinister. Simple texturing and beautiful lighting highlight the dark shadows. Soft drums and strings give the MIDI an almost mournful vibe, a sense of hopelessness that you can't ignore even as you fight to survive. The effort to invoke Doom 2's The Tenements texture theming results in this map mishmashing various visual elements together and again feeling like some artificial mimicry of a real place. Aside from this very direct reference, which must be an intentional homage given how overt it is, we've shed virtually all recognizability from this as a place on Earth. It now feels like a place that has been completely abandoned by all living things and by all sense of reason. Map 18, Elder Shrine. This is another claustrophobic map that comes with quite a lot of bite, literally. This inhospitable opening is a sign of things to come. The whole map is an effort in keeping yourself from being smothered in one dark corner or another. The monster composition, borrowed from Courtyard, makes very effective use of low-threat demons and the dearth of wiggle room, and it's our proof that Obsidian knows how to dole out punishment when it really wants to, without leaning into bloat and excess. By now, it's begun to feel like we're building to something once again. We've ventured far from home, and indeed, whatever an Elder Shrine is, it isn't the kind of place you expect to find unless you go digging in the darkness. We've peeled away that mask of false reality to reveal the vestige of hell underneath. Or perhaps it's better to say, we've reached the point where that skin has melted and fused, so it's impossible to tell the difference between the two worlds anymore, and maybe impossible to separate them again. There's a welcome return of toying with our nostalgia as Elder Shrine wears the Courtyard's influence more on its sleeve than we've seen in a while. Familiar setups are realized in far deadlier variants, that malevolent undertone that's been stalking us through the WAD now beginning to uncoil and stretch its rigid limbs. a darkness whose beckoning we can now hear, the pull to draw ever closer. That anticipation building, the slow curve Obsidian is known for, this is one of the moments where it finally boils over. The original's actual courtyard area reimagined is the setting for the final battle, a scalding flash of pandemonium that hits like a truck because of how careful the pacing has been. As the seal at the core of the shrine unlocks, you're similarly hit with a certainty that there's only one way out. You know what it is. It's through. Map 19, Phosphine. This is the after image of the world we're leaving behind, burnt into our memory like seeing spots, seeing something that you can't actually see. This is a compacted linear adventure with a similar effect as that closed-eye after image. Its source map is a confusing and needlessly convoluted adventure that Phosphine in practice bears far less resemblance to than it feels like it does. In a similar way, the map visually feels grander than it actually is, with clever detail implying the presence of vast structures beyond but not separate from the bounds of the map. That feeling that there is something just beyond, just over the next precipice. Perhaps that is the tiny moat we've affixed ourselves to, which drives us to continue deeper into this bleak nightmare. That familiar call to darkness, the compulsion to investigate the crash heard in the basement in the middle of the night. There is no other choice. Map 20, Tehairan, is the boss map of Episode 2. A thrilling closer that's not interested in taking any more time than it needs. Resist an onslaught that encroaches from every angle while you dart and weave away from the danger of multiple cyber demons, archviles, and a spider mastermind. It's a deadly ordeal with very limited cover, but if you keep moving, then the chaotic infighting will be your refuge. In truth, this is another map that looks scarier than it is, and if that's something you notice, then perhaps the episodic climax won't quite land with you. But one thing I consistently appreciate about Obsidian is how pared back it often is. It feels like one of Snaxolotl's major paradigms was to do as much with as little as possible, and rarely does Obsidian tread into overt showmanship and bombast. Whether as a function of the vanilla limitations or the author's own creative humility, you rarely see segments culminate in grand monuments or outright theatrics. When the danger is finally put to rest, it's time to enter another portal where the truth is revealed. This splendor of experiences has in fact been our slumbering spirit, dreaming our way into other souls. It is our nature to resist, a will so steadfast that not even death can truly snuff our flame. Or perhaps it is the very nature of the force that we resist, the afterlife of hell and its subsumption of our world into its own, that's granted us the secret to fighting back. With Map 21 of Flesh and Fission, we've returned to the world we left behind, but neither us nor it are the same. This is the world in full decay, its meat and sinew decomposed, skull bleaching under a boiling sun, ribcage picked clean and exposed by carrion eaters, and its essence spilling into the disorder of hell. Dune 2's Hell episode struggled with not always feeling like hell, and this map exemplifies one of the better ways to live up to that actual potential while taking notes from the original maps. This clash of Doom 2's somewhat garish hell textures with its more nuanced earth textures does a lot to sell us on the idea of a fusion of worlds, but it's through a much more intentional use of environmental storytelling and detailing that the theme is fully realized. Disparate elements of the former world linger like half-digested remains while pulsing pillars of meat and circuitry loom darkly in the distance. This corrupted world brings a heightened danger, and you'll feel your struggle refreshed and amplified. At times, this map feels a bit like an expedition, The starting area serves as a mini hub that you return to at various points during the map, because it's the only place you'll find health. This means you'll have to survive gantlets of attrition from checkpoint to checkpoint before you can return, and mistakes can come at a high cost. This late teleporter area is really deadly, with a handful of Hell Knights that can't be ignored, but a ceremony of chain gunners that must be killed, phasing in and out of place around you and testing your reflexes. As you climb atop hulking mounds of bleeding flesh imbued with crude circuits, dancing through a web of demon projectiles, the horrific noise of the atonal MIDI crescendos, and you begin your final push. This macabre vignette sets the hideous tone of what remains to be done, and makes it very clear that progress will now be hard-fought and exhausting, and your weariness will have to wait for another day. Map 22, Mausoleum, is a short, prickly little ordeal that fills in as one of those transitionary maps. With several glances thrown toward Doom 2's catacombs, it's not really trying to do much besides keep the momentum going. The combat in this map is as close-quartered as it gets, and combined with the overall resource starvation, invokes a smothering feel. Even cursory affairs are not to be trifled with at this point, lest the Mausoleum become the place that you rest your bones. Map 23, Hazard Pay, is the level of challenge we can expect to face from here on out. Coming in with an explosive opening, opportunistic usage of barrels and evasive movement are the only means of survival. Barrels of Fun is practically too noteworthy of a map not to reference here. These barrels are put to good use as your early damage output in a WoD that doesn't generally feature them that often. Deepen the bowels of hell with the rest of your digested world. Expect the opposition to really make you bleed. Nothing short of a full-on siege and frantic footwork will be effective here. You'll never hope to find any hardware if you don't press for it. This arena of brick and steel actively works against you, shifting at inopportune moments, ordinarily mundane, but in this reality, unsettling because you can see it as it really is, contorted not in form, but in purpose. The excitement persists until the very end. Your bloodthirsty fervor carries you through turbulent onslaught after onslaught. But I gotta point out, if you're ever in need of an example that demonstrates the Spider Mastermind's reputation of uselessness, look no further than this one. It's quite a shame to cap off the map with such a toothless encounter, and it's a rare misplay by the author, but perhaps a reprieve we might end up taking for granted. We continue to answer the oppressive call of darkness. The only way out is through, and the only way through is down. A blind charge further into the unknown. The pitiless nature of Map 24, Abyssal Refuge, yields another survival-oriented journey set in a vast cavern with a deep nukage pit. Owing to its Doom 2 forebear, the chasm, the perilous course before you demands precise footwork, and combines that with small, tight encounters and a torturous resource famine. It's the kind of map where a box of shells and a rocket are a big secret to find. You end up having no choice but to take risks. Holding your breath and throwing caution to the wind become a common gambit. Every shot will have to count. Make good use of the berserk when you get it, and mind your rad suits. With your heart already pounding, it nearly leaps out of your throat as you hear the shocking, unexpected wail of the icon of sin. Some presence here is genuinely affronted at your intrusion. Shadow and slime-drenched alcoves lay your path and hide the traps that will spill forth hell's opposition to you. Something is getting upset, and you better be ready. The metal slime maze is a standout fight, forcing you to navigate a charge of pinkies and cacodemons that clog up the tunnels while ambushing chain gunners area deny the open zones that afford maneuverability. You'll have to punch your way through for the scant health that's always just out of reach, and if you take too long, the scattered rad suits as well. It's impossible to shake the danger. Cleverly, monsters are able to teleport from side to side quickly, while you are forced to trudge the winding and narrow halls, creating the rare situation where demons have far more mobility than you, and ensuring there's always one nearby to block off your escape from pursuit. If the cramped spaces below don't give you claustrophobia, then perhaps the vast cavernous spaces above might give you megalophobia. Similarly to Map 19, this one's design implies far more space than is actually present. You feel infinitesimal within this map, and in the grander scheme of things, what change can you hope to effect on a darkness, an abyss so expansive as this? Obsidian's version of hell is inexorable. How could any effort against it be anything more than futile? But the occasional cries that ring out in long echoes against the cavern walls infer that perhaps some other outcome is possible. Remakes of the Chasm could have an equal chance of sinking or swimming, primarily for the same reasons other fan favorites work or fail, but the Obsidian brand layer of extra hostility adds the finishing touch that enables Abyssal Refuge to work as an homage and as a component of a different vision entirely. The WoD reaches backward and pulls a version of the Chasm directly from your nostalgia, that idealization of it which lives far grander in your imagination than it does in reality, and saturates the original with those memories to create this remake. And in turn, the Chasm feels like it fits in with Obsidian's own pathos, like a natural extension of the twisted world that this WoD brings to bear. You emerge from the darkness in Map 25, Exsanguination, and a return to the surface, sloughing the weight of the abyss from your shoulders. This also marks the reemergence of faster-paced action, as if that time below afforded a moment of lonely reflection needed to galvanize you in your fight against hell. Megawads need some momentum as you hit the home stretch, and this jolt in the pacing comes at the right time. Snaxolotl's penchant for windy staircases and wandering halls give this map a nice free flow. The encouragement of movement helps create some of that uptick in the pacing, while the combat itself takes care of the rest. An ever-reviving revenant in the central courtyard denies your safety, meaning you'll be dashing in and out of cover to nab supplies whenever you return. A prevalence of hit scanner ambushes and a stingy amount of armor means you'll need a reflexive trigger finger or else, to invoke the map's title, you'll be doing a lot of bleeding. It hits a bit of a sag in the middle after you clean out the areas adjoining the courtyard, and it doesn't have the clearest progression. Expect to stumble about through empty rooms and halls before you find the path. Exsanguination culminates in an underwhelming final battle, a simple ambush of chain gunners, pain elementals, and the Revenant Archvile combo that harassed you earlier emerge from the walls in a small crowded room, but something about it lacks the drama of other cramped encounters the WoD normally does so well. It's not quite a dud, but according to the author's own words, it's the one and only real burnout map of the WoD. I wouldn't go so far as to say it shows, but it's not the best example of Obsidian when it's hitting full cohesion. Map 26, Igneous. The gloves are off, and this is the map to make sure you understand. This is Hell's most agitated rebuke yet, a meat grinder of economical monster placement and utterly scornful map design. Whether it's pillars of steel that inconveniently block sightlines and prevent you from engaging at a safe distance, or deadly lava pits that restrict your movement to make staying away from threats a challenge, Igneous ensures you can never remain comfortable in any skirmish. Ammo is at a premium with every weapon, stymieing your ability to fight back confidently and demanding careful target prioritization with frequent risk-taking. This map's heat is absolutely sweltering. Other little antagonistic details express this mean-spiritedness. One dead end near the beginning appears to be a near zero-sum resource exchange for the supplies it offers, while this locked yellow door stands here to mock you, because there is no yellow key. This medkit cannot be reached, and this red door leads to nowhere. But these also point to something else equally concerning. This hell's way of manifesting is like a cancer. It has the ability to create new forms, but abnormal in their functions. Structures exhibit a tumorous quality, emerging from unlike materials and spreading without any sense of reason. The vestiges that don't exist as a hollow simulacrum are instead fused with hellish machinery to create strange and uncomfortable instruments ordained with some unknowable evil purpose. Your time in the darkness has left you wearied, and your time in this inferno has left you sapped. Yet you must press on. You must put an end to this. The end of Igneous leads directly into the beginning of Map 27, Maligned Annex. This is the ultimate horror of misshapen reality. Hallways and staircases and alcoves and closets and walkways and nooks and more hallways, stitched together to evoke a feverish, liminal nightmare. Dissimilar materials of all kinds join as paths that lead to more paths, a place of true nothing, bereft of any rationality you might understand. The close resemblance of almost everything here to a world you think you could recognize is chilling to behold. Light cuts through windows of small empty rooms to contrast the shadows and create imposing shards of darkness. Pillars protrude erratically from the floor. Bookcases seemingly prop up the fiendish red sky. Towers of fiery circuitry sit atop falls of blood and pulse with some mysterious purpose, and even reality itself appears to split apart in places. It lays upon you a feeling of dread, understanding that you could never have any hope of reasoning with whatever dark essence beats at the center of all of this. There will be only violence and more violence. Combat at the start is slower and more methodical. At times it gives thy flesh consumed, which seems to be a clear bit of inspiration throughout Obsidian. The pump shotgun, depending on your initial path, gets a surprising amount of work this late in. Revenants make a more frequent appearance than they normally do, and even the rare Archvile drops in. I wouldn't be surprised if there were fewer than 10 in the whole wad before now. This is the clearest sign we're approaching the apex now, and it's nice to get to this point without being encumbered by a lot of bloat, which is a common pitfall in megawads in general. Even this late in, Obsidian is trying to do as much with as little as necessary, an economic approach that allows the wad to maintain a more measured pace without bogging down your momentum. Maligned Annex's MIDI carries a lot of Aubrey Hodges in its unsettling atmosphere. The long notes of the low strings and choir vocals evoke a sense of finality, forming dark chords with a foreboding resonance. There is no triumph in these notes, only a kind of sorrow as you come to understand that whatever victory you might achieve at the end will come at a great cost. You will press forward, because it is in our nature to be beckoned by darkness. Map 28, Thresholds Beyond, is that darkness, made into one whole, the trap you've known you're being called to, sprung at last. Pure and absolute spite marshaled into one final stand against you. No chamber or crevice yielded for free. Every step forward earned only with wanton shedding of blood. Thresholds Beyond is the nexus point of hell's nothingness, utterly stark in its design. Jagged shapes, saturated in black pitch, sliced through with red rocks as if open wounds, and a deluge of demons bleeding forth. The evil that lurks in this space between spaces is relentless, and never before in the WoD have you felt so outmatched. Monsters flood into the map and jam up every drop of free space. Lost souls spewing from pain elementals, specters petrifying the very shadows as the darkness itself walls you out, revenants barraging you from overhead crags, and archviles emerging as dead ends to any escape. The weaponry is there, but acquiring it in this chaos is a feat. If you know where the BFG is, the tide turns almost immediately. Otherwise, the map will demand constant footwork through chaos and a lot of persistence to break through. If you can hold, though, eventually the map will break against you. Once again, there are shapes and structures of strange form, struggling to make an ersatz world that could never be yours. Energy pulses here in incomprehensible ways. Angles jut in and out as a sharp threat to your sanity if you focus on them too long. This is why you feared to come when beckoned. No human soul could survive in this kind of darkness for very long. As a junction of places, the threshold bends into another world and you find yourself near your goal now. You've come upon a great beast of flesh and wire in Map 29, Epiclesis, and here is where you will invoke it to descend so that you may sunder it in bloody sacrament. A living end. Similarly to its Doom 2 forebear, Epiclesis is set amongst shadowed and jagged precipices, wrapping stubbornly around a central final destination. Beginning with a reverent nod to the original, you descend into a vast cavern to behold this great carnal aberration, darkly dreaming this fusion of hell and earth into existence. Reaching it will be a final test of determination, fraught with danger only Obsidian can conjure. Detritus from both worlds stacks up here in harrowing mounds, seeming as though they may teeter or be shucked off into the abyss at any moment. Recognizable homages to the original Map 29 are found throughout, and it would be endearing if it weren't unsettling to see our nostalgia collected here on a congealed heap, like hell has digested our very memories. Snaxolotl embraces the legacy of the living end and fuses it into Obsidian's core precepts. Its formula for danger and tension, its spitefulness, its despair, its imagination, to create a map that cannot exist without the original, and yet awakens anyway into its own identity. You fall into a familiar rhythm of risky footwork, pressing uncomfortably into mobs and making careful choices about resources. Set amongst vistas of stark architecture and bleak atmosphere, Obsidian has found its calling. Here it will be heard. As you circle around to the summit that looks out over the great beast, there is still one final surprise in store. Battered and impossibly wearied, your ascent to the apex triggers an icon of sin, stealing your breath in a map that has already done it several times. The aberrant evil rallies one final push against you. In a clever twist, the map now has you circling back around again, this time with keys in hand, but against the clock and even more chaos. Your victory means bringing the whole world down upon this beast. Somehow, you conjure such a calamity, and are greeted to watch as you and the beast are buried under the collapse. But you've been put into one sarcophagus before, and this is not the end. The end comes with Map 30, Obsidian. You find yourself in a compressed tangle of the world, having fallen all around you, and it seems the beast may still cling to life with faint heartbeat. There remains a horde of demons to carve through before you can finish the job, but now your resolve is immutable. In confronting the darkness, you've arrived at the deepest place you can go. If that hasn't stopped you, then what will? The beginning is all about momentum, which has finally swung back in your direction. A Megasphere and SSG provide the means to violently impose your will unhindered. Showers of blood erupt around you as you charge through the misshapen remains of this world, demons in complete disarray and easy pickings for your aggression. It feels good to let loose, and there's a kind of magnetism in how the map's corridors almost pull you through them on your way to some heavy hardware. In possession of real firepower, now you're at full tilt and it is time to go. Breaking out into the main chamber, your final assault is absolute bedlam. There's a heavy air of confused aggression about how the demons confront you, as if the entire horde is still seeing double after the blow you struck in the previous map. Even so, this is slaughter in the spirit of Obsidian, nothing short of chaotic, intense, and deadly. You're like a bird caught in a cyclone, desperately trying to avoid being swallowed up by the swirling gale, but you have the power to push through when you need it. Carelessness will be your death, and you're still never given a full restocking cache at any time, but this kind of turmoil affords some freewheeling as well, giving you range to dart and weave, instigate infighting, take some shots of opportunity, and tuck away into a small corner for a quick breath before exploding back out into the fight. This is the largest horde you've faced in Obsidian, but it's not infinite. Foregoing a typical Icon of Sin finisher, this is a war of attrition you can win, and eventually, the dark chamber will settle into stillness. Just you and the dying mound of flesh you intend to put to final rest. Classic Doom gets criticized for those quiet moments spent wandering about when the halls of the map fall silent as you've slain every demon but haven't found the end yet. Obsidian has spent its runtime leveraging those moments, tapping into your emotions, entrancing you, and so this stark quiet feels like a fitting conclusion to a WoD that derives its atmosphere from such a cold, deep place. To be alone and unnerved, that is the emotional climax of Obsidian. You finish your task with one final climb. By now, you can safely expect triumph, but Obsidian has instilled you with a kind of bleak skepticism. You wonder what the caveat is, how hollow the triumph will be. You slay whatever this beast is, and the chamber gives way to the load of the world above, trapping you inside a cavity of mangled flesh and bone. A future for the fading vestiges of Earth, a tomb for you. It's patently grim, the other shoe dropping, the moon eclipsing the sun. As Obsidian draws to a close, it seems to have fulfilled its threat to leave you haunted in a way that Doom 2 itself never could. The end disabuses you of the belief that things can return to the way they were, the folly of attachment, a calamitous truth, but one we already know. Things can only move on, they will never move back. But to cast aside the longing and misplaced hope that comes from trying to hold on means being able to embrace something new. It won't be immediate. There may be a long period of emptiness, a time in exile, wallowing in the depths. But you can't overlook that inkling of some tiny bubble of promise rising back up to the surface. Because what our attraction to darkness often hides from us is that Obsidian is a natural, necessary process, a process of shedding. Dying leaves falling from the branch at autumn's outset, or a wilting flower's petals drifting quietly toward the dirt, carried away by the wind. An old part dies, but in its wake, something new will take its place as the process of decay portends the return of matter to a primordial state, the return to a bed of creation, and perhaps eventually the rebirth of a world once more.